Aid to Ukraine now coordinated directly by NATO. No giving up of the army size even if Ukraine is invited to NATO itself. The meeting in Brussels is seen as building up the negotiations position. Putin's direct-indirect line with the people and other topics in our today's episode. Let's go. Ukraine must be strong when the time comes to start peace talks, Ukrainian president stated on the meeting in Brussels. Even if invited to join NATO today, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated during a press briefing in Brussels on December 19th, as reported by a journalist from the Kyiv Independent. The idea of demilitarization was one of the false pretexts that Russian President Putin used to justify the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. According to an investigation by Radio Free Europe project Sistema, in November, Moscow's initial draft peace proposal to Kyiv demanded Ukraine to reduce its army to just 50,000 personnel, one-fifth of its strength in 2022. Zelensky emphasized that Western pledges of military and financial aid are insufficient to guarantee that Putin won't launch another attack on Ukraine. The best solution is a strong army, a large, robust force, the largest in Europe. We simply cannot afford to weaken our military under any circumstances, President Zelensky stated.
First of all, with leaders, and I think it's a very good opportunity to speak about security guarantees for Ukraine for today and for tomorrow, as you said. Well, almost everything said. But it's really very important that to use these 2 days in Brussels to meet with all our partners and to have the same, what is very important, not divided, the same joint position of Europe. How to secure Ukraine, how to strengthen us, our people, citizens, civilians, and of course to do stronger our army, which is very important. And of course you said about the priority, the winter, and of course it's about air defense, about the systems, the number of such systems.
Zelensky reiterated that NATO membership would provide the strongest security guarantees for Ukraine. And speaking at a briefing following his meeting with President Emmanuel Macron of France in Brussels, he said that we are not waiting for an invitation to NATO from anyone. We are fighting for this right. The president also expressed Ukraine's commitment to building its strengths in 2025 to end the war through diplomatic means. We will do everything to ensure that the next year we are strong enough to move towards diplomacy, he added. Earlier, Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the President, noted that Kyiv is not ready to negotiate with Russia due to insufficient Western support, which prevents Ukraine from engaging from a position of strength. Zelensky also addressed Russia's intention, stating that he doesn't believe that Putin wants this war to end, but we will figure it out. On our side, we are doing everything to ensure this war ends fairly, for us, for Ukraine, the president stated. Ukraine's rhetoric has shifted amid increasing expectations of potential ceasefire talks. This comes as US President-elect Donald Trump announced his intention to push Kyiv and Moscow towards negotiations. How it goes, nobody knows, but we can obviously see a build-up of the position for possible, and I mean possible, negotiations in the future. If you want to assess the people of the country, look at who's leading them. Because the people always have leadership that they deserve, as the saying goes, and this year's direct-indirect line of Putin clearly demonstrates it. Calling the war movement and calling for an experiment by bombing Kyiv with every missile Russia has. Yes, that seems like an open for peace rhetoric, isn't it? And what about Syria? The Russian president said that Russia did not wage war there, so their retreat is not a fail.
You asked about Syria. You and those who receive your salaries would like to present everything that is happening in Syria as some kind of failure, a defeat for Russia. I assure you that it is not. Russia has won. We just lost their military bases and so everything is super. Why didn't the Assads lose? There he is in Moscow city. All in all, we achieved our goals. And even those groups that once fought with the Assad regime with the government troops. They too have undergone internal changes. It is not without reason that today many European countries and the United States want to establish relations with them, if they are terrorist organizations. So why are you going there? So they have changed, haven't they? And that means that to a certain extent the goal has been achieved. We even moved special operations forces from there at one time. We did not fight there.
And Putin replies that it was the Ukrainian side that refused to negotiate, allegedly. He said that there were agreements in Istanbul that could have been reached. But your supporter Boris Johnson came with a good haircut, meaning former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and said that we should fight to the last Ukrainian, continuing to replicate already two narratives of Russian propaganda. First, that it is Ukraine who refuses to start peace talks, and number two, that allegedly Western politicians made Ukraine fight to exterminate the nation. So you have to make your own conclusions of the readiness for peace that is present in today's Russia. And so it goes. And today we have in our UATV studio the former special US representative for Ukraine, Mr. Kurt Walker. Greetings, Mr. Walker.
Greetings, nice to be with you.
It is a pleasure to see you in our studio, and what I would like to discuss with you today is the new special US representative to Ukraine, Mr. Kellogg. What do you think of this person and his maybe attitudes to politics, and what is the interest of the United States for Ukraine situation now?
Right. Well, first off, I've met Keith Kellogg a couple of times. He's a very capable, very serious guy, retired general. One of the things I like about him and I like about military guys in general is that they understand the relationship between goals and strategy and resources. That you have to have a realistic plan as you put things together. And I think he gets that very much. As for the interest of the United States, I think President-elect Trump has been very clear that he wants there to be peace. And he understands that you achieve peace through strength. And he's repeated that phrase, peace through strength, many, many times. He attributes a lot of the challenges that we see in the world now, whether it's Russia's aggression against Ukraine or wars in the Middle East or rising threats from China. He attributes all of that to weakness from the West and weakness from the Biden administration in particular. That's his view. And as a result, it indicates a desire to reestablish a position of strength. Now, I think he wants to give Putin every push and every opportunity to end the war. And he said that he would call Putin and tell him, end the war. That doesn't mean that Putin will comply. I think Putin wants to wage the war. And I think as Trump sees that, it's going to require that we do even more to support Ukraine to convince Putin that it's never going to work.
And today, Vladimir Putin held a direct-indirect line on a live broadcast, and he said a lot of things that don't come up even together about the war itself, and he clearly doesn't want the war to end. What do you think about that? As President Zelensky now in Brussels, so they are building up our Ukrainian negotiation positions with their strengths. Both Rutte and Zelensky were talking about this. And on the other side, we have Putin with his strange claims.
Yes, well, that's exactly right. And that's a very good dynamic for people to see. I think that even, during the course of the presidential campaign, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, accusing Ukraine of wanting the war, accusing Ukraine of not wanting the peace. And I think it's becoming more and more clear to everybody. President Zelensky is ready to end the war. He wants there to be peace. He's prepared to negotiate. And it's Putin who does not want that. And that is increasingly obvious. And that is important for people to see because it means that you can't just win the war by giving everything to Putin. That is capitulation, and that will encourage him to attack again and again and again.
Yes, unfortunately, such an attitude leads to other wars in all places of the world. Even Korea can be under threat if that, God forbid, happens, if the capitulation of Ukraine happens. And what do you think about the possible deal that some people were discussing to use Ukrainian natural resources in response to strong security guarantees from the United States in particular?
Yeah, I don't see it that way. I don't think we should be talking in terms of a deal of Ukraine giving up resources of some kind. It needs to be a fair peace. Those are President Trump's words. It needs to be a fair peace, and there ought to be rapid economic growth and development of Ukraine once there is peace. There ought to be increasing investment from the West and from the United States. For that to happen, what Ukraine needs to focus on is a rule of law environment, a reliable, welcoming climate for business. That is what is essential for business to come to Ukraine and for it to be successful. That's where I would focus rather than on these shiny objects of say, oh, we have these resources and you can access them. That'll happen naturally in a market economy if you have the right rules and laws in place.
So you are seeing the economy and possible concessions like joint enterprises of Ukraine and Western capitalists, investors, US investors, working jointly in Ukraine under the rule of law. And that is a key to prosperous peace, maybe to economic growth of the country and building up a strong army of our own.
Absolutely, yeah. I wouldn't call that a concession. I would call that development. I think that Ukraine needs to decentralize, it needs to privatize, it needs to open up its economy in order to grow into a modern European economy. I was just in Poland last week, and Poland has done remarkably well. They now have GDP per capita of about $22,000 in Poland. When they regained their independence, the same time as Ukraine, more or less, it was about the same size economy as Ukraine. And now Poland is in a vastly different position because they made the right kind of decisions about the marketplace. And I think Ukraine has that opportunity now as it comes out of this war to do the same thing.
You know, there's a long story between Ukraine and Poland relationships, all those differences in religion and perspective of history, but let us hope that the economic cooperation will be the future of our relations with the United States and with such important partners as Poland, as Baltic states. Maybe you have some last remarks to make because we're short on time, something interesting you'd like to say?
Sure. Well, Poland has been one of the greatest supporters of Ukraine over these past 3 years of war. They've taken in millions of refugees who've left Ukraine. They have become the critical logistics hub for providing military aid to Ukraine. They have the knowledge and the technical ability to assist Ukraine. So I think there are historical and attitudinal challenges on both sides. People have some pride on both sides, but I think the reality is that Poland is and will continue to be one of the critical supporters for Ukraine in Europe, in the European Union, and in NATO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. It was an honor to have you in our studio and to talk to you about the things that we discussed. Please have a nice evening and be sure to come back to our studio again. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And that seems to be all for today. Thank you for watching and remember to support our channel by hitting that like, subscribe and notification button. That helps us to deliver news of the free world directly from Ukraine. Have a nice evening and don't let propaganda win.